Hi everyone, I am Bryan Mullins the Fox. I am going to make the history of my life clearer than my cringeworthy 2018 WattPad story, filled with inconsistencies and false memories. I was an amateur when I was 18. That creepy fanfic I wrote was nothing of value, and someone else decided to archive it. It got deleted by WattPad themselves. I didn't delete that in shame, just to be clear. Still proving that I had nothing to hide. It was there the whole time until WattPad removed it themselves. I'm no longer a fan of All Dogs Go to Heaven in general. I rewatched the first one and it was bad. I watched a review of the sequel and that one was worse than the first, as you people can tell. I grew out of that crush as 2021 was still a new year, after 7 years. To go off on a short rant, I admit that I used to be a shameless degenerate, but I've changed ever since I started learning how the internet is and how people act in a way to try to put you down, cancel you, and just dismiss you for being cringe. There are some things that I will leave out for personal reasons. I have my own limits when it comes to giving shit out, but there are public schools that I went to, not private, so it's not me doxing myself in this video. I will add clips from my 2021 vlog series known as The Adventurous Mischiefs in a Post-Detective World, and including a trailer of a documentary coming out this Thanksgiving that I will mention later in this video, alongside with my moving out story. Without further ado, let's begin. I was born on May 7th, 1999 at the Travis Air Force Base in Solano County, or Fairfield, California, in room 60 at 38 weeks gestation. I was the last of the 5 that my mother gave birth to. I'm not mentioning how exactly I was born. I was diagnosed with autism in 2001. I'm not going to mention what cartoon supposedly traumatized me or any misremembering of a song, an event, a movie, things I did that aren't noteworthy or memorable. That shit's irrelevant, but for all I know, it won't matter anyway to people. When it came to food, I was always repulsed, gagged, and even threw up at the thought of or when I tried to eat mashed potatoes. All of that because I somehow thought it had bones in it. I am more used to mashed potatoes now, but I wasn't back then. The same applied to peas, green beans, but I still don't like butter beans. I like my vegetables much more than I did as a kid. Me, my mom, my dad, and my sister lived in California, not for a couple of weeks, but for a couple of years. My mom and dad got divorced in 2002. We then moved into a mobile home in Charlotte, North Carolina. I went to Supply Elementary School there. My mom's grandparents lived in other places like that mobile home not too far from the one that we lived in until Hurricane Arthur hit it in 2002. We were in and out of 2 houses, the one in North Carolina and the other one in South Carolina. There was drama between my mother and grandparents that made it impossible to live in South Carolina for too long, until around 2005. Long after one of my mom's exes put me in the freezer as a sick prank to scare my mother. Around the late 2000s, I was made aware of YouTube's existence and started watching random videos like VHS openings, the farting cat, etc. I was, later in my childhood, made aware of my mother's and grandmother's collection of Christian music CDs and tapes. I was raised in a devout Christian family myself, and when I was a Christian, I was a complete retard and a spastic mongoloid. Throughout the 2000s, I went to Westview Primary School, where I was having some troubles with math. It even got to the point where I was bullied and was struggling between 2nd and 3rd grade because of my autism. My mom once promised that if I solved all of these math problems without having trouble in a certain period of time, mainly 60 seconds, that she'd give me a small-sized bottle of Coke and an orange.
Childhood summer vacations. Throughout the better part of a decade, we went to these 3 houses in Ohio. Number 1, 1348 Pierce Avenue from 2009-ish to 2011. Number 2, 3496 Cadell Road from 2012 to 2013. And number 3, 3552 Wymore Place from 2012 to 2013. Again, let's start at around 2009 for the sake of brevity, because I can't really remember much at all about what happened before such times, except for the time I broke off the control knob of an old grill and my dad screamed at me, or the time back in like 2004-ish, I was somehow misbehaving in an old Lincoln car. We stopped the car, I was taken out of it, and left to be spanked right in front of it. Here are a few main memories I had of 2009 summer vacation. Number 1, the basement of the house, in which we casually watched old VHSs like Speed Racer, The Lion King, and others, and played games like Gran Turismo 4, a Madden NFL game for the PS2, or a karaoke game that my sister got for herself and me back then. Number 3, when my dad and Linda picked us up, it was usually at a certain TA gas station somewhere in Virginia. Number 4, we usually went to the thrift store a couple or so times, usually to get some more VHS tapes and other stuff to take with us home after vacation is over. Number 5, on the 4th of July, we usually went to one of our uncle's house to have fun, eat, and watch fireworks on TV or hear them outside. Number 6, we came back with glow-in-the-dark sticks with vivid neon colors. Number 7, I cried when Michael Jackson died. And finally, number 8, I no longer fear the yeehaw cowboy from 2004. I used to be deathly afraid of cowboys for being harassed with a tiny cowboy plush that sings and screams yeehaw. Or maybe was it 2005? I don't know, I could be wrong. Let's get to the 2010 summer vacation, shall we? Number 1, at the time, pink was my favorite color, my absolute favorite color. So anytime we went to the old Dollar Tree store and got stuff like plastic bottles and other miscellaneous things, I always choose the ones that are pink. Number 2, I remember keeping a little baby doll with pink clothing, and I can't remember what I called the baby, but I once dreamt of having future kids, 2 of them, called Fucker and Asshole or something between the 2. Nothing much else is remembered about the 4th of July other than what was described for 2009. Number 4, I remembered going to COSI to have some fun with science and other subjects. So did my close sibling. Number 5, me and my closest sibling used to eat microwave foods like mac and cheese and spaghetti and meatballs. And number 6, we occasionally went to go to the movie theater and watch a kids film. And then we left the summer vacation as usual. And now for 2011. Number 1, the summer vacation was about a whole decade ago. I feel so old now, even though I'm 22. Number 2, this was the last childhood summer vacation where we went to 1348 Pierce Avenue, a home that was built in 1959. Back then, I thought the house was built in 1966 or something, but back then I was wrong. I also remember constantly watching The Emperor's New Groove. Number 3, one time, Linda's husband named Bill got so drunk at such an old age, he fell over and had to be picked up and walked to his bedroom to sleep. Later that year, Bill died, so my dad and Linda had to sell off the house in 2011 to move into their separate homes the next year. Number 4, I think we went to see a Transformer movie and I kept getting scared at cue marks, the occasional dots that just showed up at the top right corner of the big screen every 20 or so minutes. Number 5, I remembered as a kid a few years back going to my aunt's house and seeing a little eggplant laughing at me, so I pushed it off the ledge when the tall window was open. And I don't think it was the octagon window, that's for sure, but I could be wrong. Number 6, we then left the vacation home like once before. Now let's get to 2012. Number 1, we were introduced to 2 homes. 3496 Cadell Road and 3552 Wymore Place in Columbus, Ohio. Number 2, I was actually able to watch Netflix. More specifically, watch stuff like Jackass, Jackass 2, and Super Size Me. VHS-wise, I got to watch Charlotte's Web and The Simpsons and others, and still got to play the same games like Gran Turismo 4. Number 3, I once got injured in the wrist by my close sibling's clever karate move and had to drink tonic water for steady recovery. Number 4, I got to play some other games like Grid and listen to songs that were considered quote-unquote chopped and screwed. Number 5, I finally found out for the first time the origins of the dramatic chipmunk. Number 6, we went to see Ted. Right after that, a severe thunderstorm came tumbling down on us with heavy rain, gusty winds, and a long-term power outage. Number 7, I felt shivers down my spine while taking cold showers during that power outage. It was not pleasant. And also, every night when the power was on, when I take nice and warm showers, I hear this big-ass thud, like this. Probably because a bird hit the window or some shit like that. Number 8. Once power came back on, things slowly improved while I watched Smotimations on Netflix. And number 9. We left the blue house with red shutters back then to go back to South Carolina after a 9 to 13 hour trip like usual. And finally, last but not least, the 2013 summer vacation. Number 1, we always slept in the basement on a nice and sturdy bed. Number 2, when I was 14, I had a Nobby instead of an iPad due to past family trust issues. Number 3, I remember watching movies like The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, Jackass 2, and all the others I've seen before. Number 4, this was the last year when childhood vacations were a thing. Number 5, relations with my dad and Linda sorta soured. She misbehaved at a buffet and was kind of high when she was like laughing. And my dad was constantly telling her to stop doing that. Number 6, relations with my dad and Linda slowly recovered to normalcy. And number 7, we left the summer vacation as this one was our last. And that's when I found out that we, as children back then, me and my close sibling, were having these usual summer vacations for the past 10 years, between 2003 and 2013. Thank you for coming with me on this beloved journey to a trip down memory lane.
I graduated primary school, then went to Westview Elementary School. All the while, we moved to Latson, South Carolina, and then back a year later. I went through elementary school in South Carolina until we moved to Colorado later in 2009. I then went to Ranch Creek Elementary School, where I was part of a choir, sang for a crowd, and other fun things. I did get into trouble here and there, but those were just minor run-ins. I graduated from that elementary school. I moved back to South Carolina later in 2010, went to Westview Middle School for a time. I got suspended for making an inappropriate comment temporarily. Moved to James Island, into a duplex with some serious bedbug issues, which was significantly reduced with some brown diatomaceous earth. All of this took place when we were in James Island between 2011 and 2012. During this time I was in James Island, I then went to Fort Johnson Middle School, got into trouble for having a mental breakdown at a bingo match because I lost, called my sister a bitch, and made her cry. One early morning, my brother made my mother cry because he didn't do the laundry. I maintained my composure for the rest of my middle school years, even when my brother had anger issues, and he has since been a reformed man ever since. And then we moved back to our grandparents' house. I got used to watching 200 classic cartoons on DVD throughout 2011 to 2013. I also got to watch old Christmas-themed or Christmas-related cartoons because at that time, I was completely unaware of what was going on in society, and I was a blind fan of Christmas. And speaking of blind, throughout my childhood, I was temporarily blind more than once, but my vision eventually cleared, and I haven't been blind since. 2013 overall, on the other hand, was a shitty year where I did a bunch of stupid things and got into trouble many times.
Let's talk about the lengthy timeline / history of me being a teenage deviant and a somewhat massive degenerate from 2012 to 2017. My teenage years did not begin until I turned 13 in 2012 on May 7th, and the first ever round of degenerate / deviant moments in my teenage years was when I was up in Ohio during the summer vacation watching stuff that I should not really be seeing at all at that age, like Jackass, Jackass 2, Fritz the Cat, The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, Coonskin from 1975 that featured Scatman Crothers, and other films like Tad, in which, I shit you not, showed a full set of tits at the center of the screen once. That's what I can clearly remember out of all this. And when my mom found out that I went to see Ted as a 13-year-old young teenager, she was pissed with my father and vowed almost never to allow me and my sister to go on a summer vacation ever again. Our last summer vacation was 2013, I shit you not. When we went back to South Carolina, my teenage antics started becoming more and more apparent. And by 2013, around February of that year, shit really hit the fan in my early teenage years. And this is a shocking admission coming from me. Somehow, for some random motherfucking reason that I can't even remember now, I somehow ordered 5 pizzas in my sister's name. And the aftermath of that is where the pizzas that were supposedly ordered were taken back. And by this point, my grandparents' house were to almost never receive any pizzas from Pizza Hut ever again. But months later, the relations with Pizza Hut and that house soon recovered. Throughout the year 2013, it has been one of, or if not the worst years in my teenage years. I remember either this year or 2012 where I went online secretly to aarp.com, literally fill in a form with a fake name, use the same address and the same shit, but except the names are literally just me, just as a teenager, going on the keyboard and typing random letters. Instead of, John Doe or something like that, it sort of sounded like this. It's just absolute gibberish at this point. And when my sister first received that and seen that from the mailbox, she was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? She began showing almost everyone in the entire house. She was laughing because the whole thing I did was retarded. Finishing out 2013 was a hell of a mess, even several months after my very last childhood summer vacation with my sister. And then 2014 came around.
On January 2nd, 2014, almost a decade ago, I began watching All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, and a female character caught my eyes, ears, and attention, and of course, that is Sasha LaFleur. I fell in love with a fictional character. Everyone who's a fan of any show or fandom like My Little Pony, being a furry, being a weeb, anime, can also share this kind of quote-unquote, I was cringe and fell in love with a character that's not real sentiment. Some of you out there are far more degenerate when it comes to writing fanfics or being an outright degenerate fan than I could ever be. Some of you are not as degenerate and are even tame. I recorded audio with my sister's big blue Nintendo DSi XL, and I only had 10 seconds to record once at a time. I was familiar with this recording format. I started watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off and watched other movies like The Watcher in the Woods, and the first trailer for it with this creepy, ominous, and suspenseful music, with its off-putting climax.
The Watcher in the Woods.
I still have no idea where this music came from, even to this day, but whenever I do, I will let you know in the comments or a community post, if you will. Later that year, we moved into and out of California within the span of 3 months, between February 18th and May 18th, 2014. I've changed a lot. I started watching Netflix. My sister started watching more anime than the one she remembered fondly, like Sergeant Frog, Hetalia Access Powers, and so on. In fact, she was an anime fan far longer and long before 2014. I got an iPad mini with a pink cover slip for my birthday. My favorite color back then was pink. Now it's black, maroon, and gold. We moved back into South Carolina, but then moved again. This time, it's in a different region of the state. I became aware of the internet's existence throughout 2014 with content creators like Mr. Repsion, The Archfiend, and other commentary/rant YouTubers. I started collecting vinyl records, played around with playing 45s completely off center. I started listening to Barry Manilow, Tony Bennett, rest in peace, and other artists. I began as a freshman at Berkeley High School in Monk's Corner. The school year was something else, however. I got detention once, but managed to make it past 9th grade and spend a good portion of the early days of my 10th grade school year there. 2015 was not too eventful other than this one incident where my mother's former loved one got extremely pissed over some random Facebook post. He felt vulnerable, jealous, and the arguing got to the point where he banged his head into the wall multiple times, even to the point where he had a fucking seizure, all over something as retarded and petty as being jealous over a goddamn Facebook post. What was my mom thinking? Jesus. Surrounding me with a bunch of fucking psychos, and then shit-talking my dad, as if he were to be the biggest psycho of them all. He was dealing with PTSD because he's an Air Force veteran, and he was traumatized during his service, being hit in the head with a large piece of metal that fucked him up. He had to go through years of therapy and counseling and recover mentally and physically. Now back to the story. Me and my sister had to be picked up by my older brother back to my grandparents' house. 2016 and most of 2017 were the most stressful years of them all, and multiple things happened then. Number 1, we moved to Tennessee. I didn't live too long there. My quote-unquote stepdad was a dick, and my mom is irritable to say the least. For the worst of times. 2, the household environment there got much worse as it went on. 3, mom and her now-to-be ex-husband got into constant arguments and talks as they went out for the smoke. Number 4, I began and finished my sophomore and junior year in a high school I will keep the name of private because it's too personal, in my opinion. I was kind of mid on algebra, great at PE, and mostly stellar in physical science class. I became an atheist, and my mother's and grandparents' reaction was complete rejection, scolding, and shaming of me. And have I mentioned that I was a debate.org troll and tried to debate with an atheist that God existed and failed to prove that he did long before this all happened? Quick side note, my grandma was suffering with Alzheimer's disease, and the worst part for me is when she was at the hospital and asking for someone to get someone to help her go to the bathroom. I guess she never really needed my help, which made me break down and cry during my summer vacation with my grandparents in 2016. I used to do chores like washing the dishes and putting them in the dishwasher, making sweet tea, making myself food, and cleaning my own room. Number 5, I thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election, but I was wrong. Number 6, Trump winning caused some division, including an argument that went on for so long and hard that my mom's ex-husband and his other son left her to go on some vacation right before New Year's Eve on December 30th, 2016. Mom, whilst seeing them leave her, made me cry because I felt sorry for her when she was crying. Number 7, 2017 rang in, emotions have stabilized, and her ex-husband and his son eventually came back. Number 8, my sister graduated high school, but during this graduation, my dad showed up, causing such a dramatic turn of events that led me, my sister, and my older sister to leave Tennessee because my mom's ex-husband thought my dad was accusing him, my mom's now-to-be ex-husband, of being a cheater on Facebook, which took a long time to get to South Carolina, including the naps. While we were at my grandparents' house, we constantly heard Grandma and Grandpa having constant arguments, even to the point where my grandpa started crying. I went to walk downstairs to know what was going on, only for me to be dismissed and sent to the room I used to sleep in when I was a kid and growing up, and cried there for a little bit. Number 9, my older sister was playing Skyrim, my other sister was doing her normal things, and I was doing my edgelordy things with my iPad mini when I stumbled upon an old Disney 1959 documentary known as The Peter Tchaikovsky Story. My mom eventually drove all the way down to South Carolina, picked both me and my sister up to go back to Tennessee. They seemed to have some serious bad blood with my dad, all because of what actually led up to their divorce back in 2002, which again, I will not mention for personal reasons. Number 10, I started watching atheist videos from content creators like Dusty Smith, among others. As time went on, in June of 2017, whilst I was an edgelord junior and then senior in high school, I came up with a concept without a name about children just simply being slaughtered for not believing in Christmas and not being eaten. I continued my trolling escapades to piss other trolls off and shock other people in my high school about degenerate shit like rape on debate.org and IRL. My oldest DDO account, Bryan Mullins No Christmas, was closed, and I will now admit that I got kicked out of high school because I wrote inappropriate shit about rape. I didn't mean to write. I wrote it as a part of a long-running trolling spree, trolling that has cost me the rest of my senior year in high school. I got expelled for those comments. This happened all in the month of August, roughly 6 years ago. I got into trouble over all of this after the epic eclipse I got to see for the first time in my life. Number 11. I was living in Tennessee, walking free in and out of my room until I was physically assaulted and mentally abused for getting myself kicked out of high school. The physical assault also came from daring to question the supposed legitimacy of their religion and the Bible, and yelling back at him, talking back to him. 12. Later, in September and a good portion of October 2017, I was only allowed to stay in my room, use the bathroom, take a shower, and then go back to my room and dress, walk downstairs to eat dinner and drink water or sweet tea. I went through all of this trauma. The only time I was allowed to come out of my room at all was to do chores or mow the lawn. All the while, in September of 2017, I was writing up on a dry erase board the roast game's original concept, which later became the initial spark that started the proverbial fire of an idea in my head.
Before the roast game was proven as it is, there was a different version of the concept. The roast game was originally a psychological test, which the rules are only eat the meat without any sides. If it doesn't fill up an average family of 12, then that is not what they eat as a Christmas roast back then, like until 2016. This is also another way to prove the roast game right. Here we have the bar graph. In the first section, we have the meat: ham, chicken, beef, turkey. The serving for a family of 12. We'll get to that in a little bit. The next section, does one fill them up? We'll get to that in a little bit too. And the final section, how many whole roasts of that meat takes to fill up a whole family of 12. We'll get to that pretty soon. Okay, here it is. Now let's first start out with ham. The serving for a family of 12 without sides is 4 to 5 slices per person. Does one whole ham fill a whole family up? Nope. How many whole hams does it take to fill up a whole family of 12? 6. Next, we'll go on to chicken. The serving for a family of 12 is 5 to 6 slices per person. Does one whole chicken fill them up? Nope. How many whole chickens does it take to fill up a family of 12? 8. Now we're going on to beef. The serving for a family of 12 is 4 to 5 slices a person. Does one fill them up? No. How many whole meatloaves does it take to fill up a whole family of 12? 6. Now, finally, we move on to turkey. The serving for a family of 12, 3 to 4 slices per person. Does one whole turkey fill up an entire family of 12? Nope, not without sides. How many turkeys does it take to fill up a family of 12? 5. There you have it.
The rest of the year of 2017, all the way up to present day, when it came to my experiences after this point, and when it came to the topic of the roast game, among other things, will be covered in the upcoming documentary coming this Thanksgiving called Dropping Flies. I will play the trailer for it at the end of this video.
In this rant segment, I'll be talking about what the discussion about the topic of the roast game and researching it for long periods of time has done to me mentally, physically, and socially. Let's start off with mentally. It has changed me completely. I no longer use the internet as something to kid or fuck around with. I take the internet a whole lot more seriously than I did when I was an edgy 18-year-old. It traumatized me in a way at a certain extent where it was actually helpful. The fact that I used to believe that being a shitlord on the internet was fun, or if not edgy in any ways, sort of helped me become a much better individual and not just some sort of fucking retarded shitlord who's interested in Kekistani memes, Pepe the Frog, Donald Trump, etc. I used to be a real knob. I was a really big dick to trolls on the internet when I was even younger back in 2014. Yes, I was an internet shitlord that had his accounts deleted or taken down off of Google 7 or so years ago. How about that for some introspection? Now let's move on to physically. Every fucking time I did these long research videos, which I will play in the roast game of Final Look when it premieres this December, like the ones proving that the calories add up, proving that the death toll adds up, etc. I chose to sweat a lot. I chose to abstain from eating for long periods of time. I kind of just starved myself. So much to the point that once or twice during these long research periods that I almost passed out. I was so low on blood sugar that I had to really get myself something to eat. So I made myself some spaghetti and it was really good. It filled me right up. It was just a whole bowl of it. So my blood sugar has gone right back up to normal. So do you folks also remember that I made a rant video not too long ago, this April, in that one segment close to the end where I was complaining that I was getting chills down my spine, my legs, and even down to my ass. That I've worked so hard to put all of this into perspective for 3.5 years, if not 4. By the time the roast game of Final Look premieres this year, I really meant it. I was being literal. Sometimes nostalgic music does that to me. When it gets to a certain chilling moment where you feel this euphoria going all the way through your body, euphoria that you're doing something right in this research, it gets to you. It really does. And the rest was history. I believe that this kind of tactic is smart in and of itself. It's because it is somewhat strategic when you need to not just maintain your weight, but lose a little, gain a little. Keep your weight in moderation. Not that I have much fat in the first place. I'm mostly muscular. I have just a tiny slab of fat, quite frankly. Now let's move on to socially, and this is the part where I get a little pissed off. Losing respect on the internet from some fake friends of mine was so easy to do that I still have real friends of mine on Discord, YouTube, and everywhere else. When I was a shitlord, talking shit, posting shit, being a shit poster was a sort of common thing for me to do. I've grown the fuck out of that. Fuck all that garbage nonsense. Forget all that fucking bullshit about shit posting memes about the BMI, the USSR, and somehow Direwolf being in a pink camouflage outfit. I've grown out of that nonsense years ago, and I've moved on spectacularly. And there's really nothing else I could say other than fuck my shitlord past, long live the present, and prosper for the future. Here is the story of how the very old white and blue dysfunctional water heater had a huge meltdown and flooded my entire laundry room. This happened a few months after the old water heater caused the circuit breaker to trip more than once, probably 3, 4, if not 5 times prior to its meltdown. My dad went to work back in 2019. When he did, a few hours later when I was asleep, I noticed that I heard dripping. When I woke up, I heard lots of dripping. And then I noticed a good portion of the carpet around there is wet. And I walked into the laundry room. It was roughly an inch of that old water heater water just flooding. There were a few towels that were surrounding it. And I guess it did nothing to stop the leaking until maintenance came around and turned off the water in our fucking apartment. And for a month or so, we had no running water. So every time we went to Walmart, we had to get these gallons and gallons of water. It was at this point in 2019 that we couldn't be able to flush the toilet more than once for days. We were drinking water bottles still, but we had to rely on the giant water jugs that were about a gallon each to help flush our toilets, to help with whatever the hell we need it for, such as washing our hands. Our maintenance man came back with an alternative, similar looking water heater that was still somewhat functional, and that was only there for a few more months, up until May/June, when we officially had our old water heater replaced with a new, much larger 48-gallon water heater. It was a dark gray one instead of white and blue. After it was installed, The people who installed it sort of left a tiny hole or two in the wall, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. As long as we have a new water heater back then nothing really matters at this point. So far we had that relatively new water heater for over 2 years now. So I guess it has another decade or so left of its life. Now keep in mind, that wasn't the only maintenance issue we had in 2019, because a few months after that, we had issues with the bathtub faucet that couldn't release any water from the main spout. So my dad had to give his all to this thing, and when water finally came out, all he did was pull up the shower tab, and then the entire bathtub spout flew out. And then my dad had to walk out of the bathroom, walk his bare naked ass alongside with me while I had clothes on to shut off the water until this problem was solved. So just the morning after all this shit went down, the maintenance crew, just like the ones that helped install our new water heater the same year, a few months prior, helped replace our shower/bathtub faucet and temperature control. And now, after roughly 2 years after the fact, every time me or my dad takes a shower, turning on the water and turning it off, changing the temperature is a whole lot easier than it ever was before, even before I came here. Even when I was new here in this old apartment back in 2017, the valve to turn the water on and off in the bathtub/shower was having difficulties turning on. It was a pain in the ass for me to get water out of that fucking spout, and now it's a whole lot easier. Anything outside of this years later, we only had to deal with a few merely minor maintenance issues, such as the old refrigerator we have having a colossal meltdown and almost flooding a good part of my kitchen, mainly a fifth or if not a tenth of it. And when it was drained out, it was performing a lot better. And now, before we talk about the death of my grandmother in a mostly PG way, the Christmas star is nothing but a curse, and I will explain to you exactly how and why right now. The death of my grandmother was one of the things that always tugged at my heartstrings. She was growing too old, too skinny, she had Alzheimer's, and she couldn't bear back to live any longer. This part of the rant segment won't be long, but we'll use this as the segue to the end of the rant segment. I'm not gonna get too emotional here, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna weep, I'm not gonna whimper or sob, because I've already let all that out of my system. The day of, and a couple or so months after her death. May she rest in peace. After she died, the day of the Christmas star last year, it was almost a sheer coincidence that the day that my grandmother died was the day that the Christmas star came out at night, after a few hundred years before. It just came out to be that the appearance of the Christmas star at night on December 21st, 2020 was just as rare as my grandmother dying, when I didn't expect that to happen in the first place. It was just that middle ground of rarity that it actually happened. Likelihood didn't mean shit to that tragedy. Long before that, I wasn't even able to see Grandma in over 3 years at that point. Once I looked back at that fact and attach it to the fact that my grandmother died that day, made me really weep. It really tore my heart open. It tore a new one, and I was crying. Tears were just rolling down my eyes like a waterfall. It was painful. It sucked that I have no more grandmas in my life, and maybe in a year or two, I don't know if I'll ever have a grandpa for much longer after this.
So, the timeline began on May 13th, 2022, the day after my dad made his first plan to go to Missouri public to me. I was excited to actually go to the next home we're living in. It took us from around 1 p.m. all the way up to before 9 p.m. to the Quality Inn Hotel on the outskirts of Hannibal. May 14th, 2022, we woke up eventually, we got all our stuff out, left that hotel room empty, and checked out. We would have gotten our breakfast at the hotel, but we chose McDonald's instead, not to mention that they didn't have breakfast open yet, so we didn't want to waste our time, so we drove all the way up to our new home. The first bit of work we did when it came to going to the house at all is for me to mow the backyard and my dad to mow the front yard. This became common almost every time we arrived here. It's going to be interesting as time goes by. This is the first day among many that I actively went to the library to watch YouTube videos, do some research, download videos, and all other things throughout the months of 2022. It was a nice stay at the Columbus Metropolitan Library in Dublin, Ohio. It kind of made me feel brand new in general. May 28th, 2022, we stayed at the second hotel in Missouri, the Super 8 in Hannibal. Of course, this was only for one night. This was after another day, but this time, my dad is the only one doing the lawn mowing. May 29th. We left the Super 8 hotel, did some more lawn mowing, then drove all the way back to Columbus, Ohio. Throughout the rest of the month of May 2022, we've been clearing out that apartment until the point where there was almost nothing left to take out or take with us in the living room, including separating and organizing clothes, leaving behind all the records I couldn't take with me or wanted. And the last day of the month of May 2022, May 31st, 2022. This was my last full day living and sleeping at that one-bedroom apartment I lived in for well over 4 years at that point. I slept on the slightly dilapidated blue recliner my dad kept for years before. And now we enter into June 2022. On June 1st, 2022, this is the first day I left that apartment behind for good. We stayed at that Hawthorne Inn in Columbus once for 2 days and 2 nights. It was a pleasant stay. June 4th, 2022. We left the Hawthorne Inn, taking our stuff with us as usual. I went to the library in Dublin, got picked up, and we booked a long-time reservation at the Norwood Inn in Worthington. Right after a little bit of a delay, we got in our first room at this hotel, on the second floor. After we did so, we went to a nearby Chinese buffet. I liked it, but my dad was kind of disappointed in that restaurant. I recorded my first rant video in a hotel room saying goodbye and shitting on the dead website known as debate.org as of June 6th, 2022. Now let's go to June 9th, 2022. We left the Norwood Inn for the first time after a comfortable few days being there, even during a temporary power outage that lasted only a few hours. June 10th, 2022. I didn't have to do any lawn mowing, so I watched my dad do lawn mowing and helped him sweep up the grass off the asphalt of the street. We stayed at the Motel 6 in Hannibal for one night after driving several hours to get there and have something for us to eat on the way, a Wendy's. We left the very next morning, took another several hours to drive back to Ohio. June 11th through June 16th, 2022. After several hours of driving back to Ohio, we booked another reservation at the Norwood Inn in Worthington. Right after we did, we put all our stuff in the room. This time it's on the first floor. Throughout this stay at the hotel, I started and finished a new series called The Roast Game, Numbers by the Year, the first of its kind. On the 14th of June, after a long heat wave that affected the power at the hotel, left us without power from around 4 p.m. all the way up to 4 a.m. 12 fucking hours without power. It was painful. Just utterly painful. On the last full day of our second and last stay at the shitty Norwood Inn Hotel in Worthington, it was mostly peaceful. I had a tooth extraction that got rid of 2 disgustingly weak teeth up my very front this time, unlike only one in 2020. On June 15th, 2022, throughout the evening and night, I couldn't eat anything that I wanted until I let my gums fully heal. We left on the 16th of June, I went to the library again, and I've stayed at other hotels throughout most of June of 2022. Number 1, the Executive Inn in Chillicothe, for 2 days and 2 nights, June 17th through the 19th. 2, the Microtel Inn in Sunbury, twice for 3 days and 3 nights, June 19th through 22nd. 3. The Baymont Inn in Columbus/Rickenbacker, once for 1 night, June 22nd. 4. The Knights Inn on Poe Avenue in Dayton, for 2 days and 2 nights from between June 23rd to 25th. This is, of course, during the time of the "This Is What You Came For" rant, while it was recorded on my Lenovo P11 that doesn't exist with us anymore. And finally, 5. The Econo Lodge in Akron, 2 days and 2 nights, June 25th through June 26th. During the time we went to the Executive Inn in Chillicothe, we went to a Walmart in Chillicothe, got some more groceries, including macaroni salad. This is the first ever time I had to eat macaroni salad, because at that time, I couldn't eat anything else that's harsh, as my gums recovered from that painful double tooth extraction at an Aspen's dental clinic. I started eating normally again after that. Now let's get on to June 27th through the 30th of 2022. Then all of a sudden, due to my dad's massive financial fuck-up, regrets booking a room in a hotel with no power and no internet. We had to stay at our very first campsite this year. The hotel he tried to book a reservation at and failed was the Red Roof Inn in Dayton, Ohio. The first campsite we stayed at was Alum Creek State Park in Delaware, Ohio. And now we enter the month of July of 2022, starting with July 1st, 2022. After staying at the library for a few hours, we left Dublin and spent several hours driving all the way up to Missouri again. We drove all the way to our house and not at a hotel right away. July 2nd, 2022, after a few hours of painstaking hard work, I was drenched in sweat whilst wearing a red shirt that wasn't the kind of shirt that absorbs the sweat well. After we got the most of what we could upstairs and took it down to what is now my dad's workout room, we stayed at the Ramada Inn in Columbia, Missouri, and got a bite to eat. July 3rd, 2022, we left the Ramada Inn Hotel in Columbia, went to a Walmart in Columbia. We drove all the way up to the Days Inn Hotel in Columbus, Ohio. This hotel, out of many, had the strictest Wi-Fi I've ever experienced it being in a hotel room at all. When you go on YouTube, the restriction mode was clearly on, no matter what. I finally got to take a shower. I had a lot of acne development around my back, my arms, and some other parts of my body. It was a huge breakout. After I got done taking a shower, I felt mostly brand new, but the pain from popping all those zits was still slightly lingering on. I've only stayed at the hotel for one night on July 3rd. From July 4th to the 9th of 2022, we left the Days Inn Hotel in the morning, drove to the library, and stood there for several hours, then went back to Alum Creek State Park. This time, the reservation lasted until the 9th. All the while, I was actively working on the Roast Game Topical Autopsy, and then later, the Roast Game Topical Audit. And then, on July 9th, 2022, my first appearance at the Delaware County District Library in Delaware, Ohio was made. We've been going from campsite to campsite throughout the month of July. We went to Delaware State Park for the first time from July 8th to the 13th. We went to Wolf Run State Park in Caldwell, Ohio for the first time. Before and after, we seen Thor, Love, and Thunder, July 14th and 15th, 2022. Then we went to the Washington County Library in Marietta, Ohio, which my first appearance there was on July 15th, 2022. Then we went to the Mount Gilead State Park for the first time between July 17th and 21st, 2022. Then we went to Alum Creek State Park for the third time on July 21st, 2022. On July 22nd, 2022, we left Ohio again to continue to work on the house in Missouri. This time, we drove straight to the house within several or so hours. This in spite many restroom and gas station fill-up breaks. Now, we're in July 23rd, 2022. We woke up to continue to work on the house some more for several more hours, then we left. Went to a nearby Pranger's for groceries, including a 10-pack of Fireball whiskey. A few hours later, I recorded a video about what happened a year later after my August 2nd, 2021 interview, whilst we stayed at the Budget Inn in Columbia, Missouri. On July 24th, 2022, we left Missouri and went back to Ohio after a several hour-long drive. Then we went to Delaware State Park for the second time between July 24th through the 26th. We then went to the Kaiser Lake Campsite Park in St. Paris, Ohio between July 28th and the 31st of July 2022. All the while, around the second time we went to the Alum Creek State Park was around the last time I've ever wanted to sleep in a tent. Hence, we started sleeping in the car instead of in the tent. Now let's head into August. There was only one day that we went to Missouri and straight back to Ohio, then do some more work. And that day was August 13th, 2022. We left Missouri and came back to Ohio, this time for the rest of the month, until early September, for what will be the last visit to the house in Missouri in 2022. Then we stayed at the Days Inn in Hannibal for one night on August 13th. Then we stayed at the Super 8 in Columbia once for one night on August 14th, after we did some more work in the house. Moving, getting rid of other shit, throwing more trash, more unneeded stuff away, fixing up the kitchen, fixing up the dining room, fixing up the living room, and what we called the waiting room. Here are some more libraries we went to for the first time when we came back to Ohio. We went to the Mercer County District Library in Salina, Ohio. The first appearance was August 4th, 2022. This was during the time I was working on that compilation on every time I said the roast game between 2017 to 2022. Then, the day later, we stayed at the Piqua Public Library in Piqua, Ohio on August 6th, 2022. Then we went to the Carnegie Public Library in Washington Courthouse, Ohio on August 20th, 2022. Then we briefly went to the Lebanon Public Library in Lebanon, Ohio for a short time only, because it sucked, on August 20th, 2022. Then we went to the John McIntyre Library, that's a part of the Muskingum County Library System in Zanesville, Ohio, on August 27th, 2022. The same day as the first appearance, we went to a great Chinese buffet restaurant. Both of us liked it there. It was a decent, delicate buffet there. Alongside with a few restaurants we went to throughout these summer months that were pleasant and that go as far back as June 1st. Now let's get to September. On September 1st, 2022, prior to our last big trip to Missouri of the year, we stayed at a Ramada Inn on Schrock Hill Court in Columbus, Ohio. Me and my dad had a blast and I started working on Thanksgiving dinner numbers by the year. We drove out of Ohio and into Missouri. This time, just like another time, not at a hotel, I slept in my dad's SUV in the front passenger seat while my dad decided to sleep in that house with no power, no running water, and in a tent he assembled himself. But before we left for Missouri at the hotel on Schrock Hill Court in Columbus, Ohio, we had a nice dinner after my dad ordered DoorDash. There was one and only one day that we went to the house to do a few things. Alongside with a little work, this was the shortest day to be at the house, only to come straight back to Ohio, but this time, this would be the last for the rest of 2022 and a good portion of 2023. Before we left, one of our neighbors gave us a bag of coal to supposedly keep the old house stench out throughout the winter. We ended up never using it throughout the entire winter because we didn't have scissors. That didn't matter anyway. This is the first time staying at 2 hotels in Illinois and the first hotel I've stayed at in Indiana. We went to the house in Missouri for the last time in 2022 on September 3rd. And of course, the 2 hotels we went to in Illinois was first the Red Roof Inn in Champaign for one night on September 2nd, and Roadway Inn in Pittsfield, Illinois, once for one night, September 3rd. And then we drove all the way up to Terre Haute, Indiana to stay at an Econo Lodge, a very shitty one with very weak-ass internet, for one night on September 4th. Then, after our long stay at the Econo Lodge in Terre Haute, Indiana, we came back to Ohio to stay at Alum Creek State Park for yet another reservation. We stayed at multiple campsites, and on December 23rd, 2022, a massive winter storm ruined our chances to stay at more campsites for the remaining days of 2022. So, we stayed at the Buckeye Inn Hotel for a couple of nights and a couple of days. Then we went back to the Deer Creek State Park campsite in Mount Sterling, Ohio to get our stuff. And then we booked another reservation for a hotel room, this time at a Red Roof Inn in Grove City, Ohio. This, of course, long after we went to the first hotel since late October, which was the Travelodge Inn in Grove City, where I couldn't sleep for a little while because there was a little child screaming and crying and throwing a temper tantrum all night, kind of fucking up my sleep. So, back to Grove City's Red Roof Inn for one night. Then we left, went to the Dublin Library, where we proceeded to go back to that same hotel again after the last night we've ever slept at the campsite in Nashport, Ohio. Then we stayed at the same Red Roof Inn, but at a different hotel room in a different story, this time the first story. And this was for the remainder of December, all the way up through January 2nd. We left on the morning of the 3rd of January 2023. And then throughout the months of January and February, we went back to campsite, then hotel room to hotel room, and so on, until my dad came up with a plan to permanently move into Missouri and no longer feel like there's a need to stay in Ohio because there's no reason to. On February 11th, 2023, we left Ohio for the first and final time since September of last year. But unlike all of last year, this time it's permanent. But with all that being said, that's how my move out came along.
This was a long video to make, and August so far, for me, has been the most eventful month for all the right reasons in years. That is practically the story of my life as I can possibly sum it up and remember for long enough. I had to now address some things I wanted to keep to myself, but I also couldn't bear not talking about it anymore. Well, that's the video, folks. click the notification bell to see my Dropping Flies documentary that again is coming out this Thanksgiving. And until then, that is the summation of what led me to move out of Tennessee, live with my dad in Ohio in an apartment for 4+ years, and then move out and then live here in Missouri. I am Bryan Mullins the Fox, signing out.
Bryan Mullins the Fox proudly presents, premiering on both channels, the first ever retrospective documentary surrounding Bryan Mullins the Fox and about the topic of the roast game and how it got Bryan to the place he is now. From the roastgamedebate.org shitstorm saga to the creation of the channel Bryan Mullins the Fox on February 27th, 2018. From joining Discord to making roast game documentaries to the roast game theory and the death threats and troll comments I got from after doing so, to the great roast game triathlon drama, a drama within a drama within a drama, the roast game calorie drama, going to shit, the roast game theory drama with Star Shadow, and the Bryan Mullins the Fox vs. Vash Lancet art theft drama that ended the entire triathlon as we knew it, then as much as we know it now. Throughout 2019, 2020, and 2021, these were the years that led up to 2022, the biggest year for the topic of the roast game ever since the topic's first mention in a debate well over 5 years ago. And now we're here, coming this Thanksgiving, Dropping Flies.